All right. All right. Hello, everywhere. I'm gone 1 week, and look what happens.
Well, at least this week, Loda's got some neighbors.
Okay.
Last week, she was by herself.
All right. Well, thanks to Brad for filling in last week. I was chatting with Compass class last week. They have me up about once a year, whether they need to or not, just to talk about stuff. So hello to everyone online. All right. Want to say a special welcome to my new friend Corey in California, who's been watching us. And I know there are many other folks. Some of you are slippery because I don't even know you're there. And then I find out later that you've been watching us for months. So just a reminder, if you'd like to get information about the class, if you'd like to be on the email distribution list, do they email you? What do they do?
We'll discuss it.
Okay, send me a note and I'll get you connected with Charlotte. How about that? Our director. Welcome. Hello. So, where to even begin? There's so many things I want to talk about that are not our lesson, but we're never going to get through John if I keep diverting. Just a notable. I've got to say this. I'm going to write something about this afternoon for tomorrow, but the state of Texas is getting very creative in its biblical literalism. In its latest court brief, y'all, I am not making this up. This is the gospel truth. I went and read the brief this morning. In its latest brief with the court, making the case that Texas ought to have sovereignty to put those buoys in the Rio Grande River. Okay, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So they're trying to appeal that the Rio Grande is not navigable. Okay? Even though the Coast Guard navigates it and other, but okay, it's not navigable. Is there? So therefore, it doesn't fall under federal sovereignty. It falls under state. And their justification for this is just because it once was navigable does not mean it's forever navigable. And as evidence of this, turn to Genesis and the story of the Great Flood, because if you believe the Bible literally and follow that policy, then all of the state of Texas once was navigable and therefore should be under federal control.
We keep killing people at the rate we're killing them by putting them on a bus and sending them to Chicago.
Yeah.
And getting caught on the buoys, and their cake's going to be all.
It's just new to hear, a biblical explanation for this. I've said before, it all goes back to Genesis, and clearly that's true. So we're picking up today in the Gospel of John, chapter 10. And this is one of those well-worn passages that we know a little bit of. And I usually hate to teach these kind of passages because it's just difficult. We have so much baggage we bring to this. This is Jesus as the Good Shepherd. And this is a lovely, lovely image that we all take great comfort in. Now, the thing that we have to say first is the Gospel of John, recording the words of Jesus, and in verses 1 through 10, what Jesus is doing here is giving a parable. And it's about a shepherd. And then he goes on to apply it. The people who are hearing him don't understand what he's saying. And so we're to be excused if we don't either, right? And then he takes three different stabs at explaining to three different levels of explanation that takes up this whole chapter. We may not get through all of those today. I want to at least set it up. But the thing to remember is this notion of the Good Shepherd is not unique to the New Testament. Jesus is actually referring back to Ezekiel 34, which we'll read a little bit of in a moment. And clearly, if you know anything about the Bible at all, you know the 23rd Psalm, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, right? I was looking yesterday for how many places there are in the Bible that talk about God as shepherd, and it depends on how you count. If you count every verse or every section, it's somewhere between 50 and 118. Okay, so it's a lot of references to God or Jesus as the shepherd. So Jesus in this passage is picking up on a tradition that will be well known within his Jewish followers. And it's one that Jesus references multiple times himself. The thing we got to go back to understand is that the children of Israel and the Jews and people living in Jesus' time were living in a largely agrarian culture where people understood what it was to be a shepherd. This is very hard in North Dallas for us to get our heads around being a shepherd, right? I have seen shepherds on TV. I have seen sheep in person. I have no idea what it's like to be a shepherd other than what I've read in books, right? And anyone here been a shepherd before? Even in a play? Yeah? Anyone been the Little Shepherd Boy? Okay. Yeah, okay. That's about the closest experience most of us have to any of this, right? So here's the deal. This metaphor that was so common at the time it was written is very uncommon to us today. And it is ironic, in a sense, that the church throughout time has grabbed onto this as a very common image, but often has gold-plated it. So I was reading a commentary by Molly Marshall, who some of y'all know, who was commenting that the irony to her of Jesus as Good Shepherd is once the church really gets going and once Rome gets involved, and once we have Constantine and once we have what becomes the Catholic Church, suddenly the shepherd staff becomes a gold-plated sphere. We've gone from this simple idea to something, so we've gone from Jesus as Good Shepherd to Jesus as ruler of the universe, which is a valid image, but the things get merged for us. So a lot of times, particularly within Catholicism, I'm trying not to just totally pick on Catholicism today, but it's a good example. You can see this in Eastern Orthodoxy as well. All of the super liturgical, highly liturgical religions in Christianity have taken this to extremes, right? And we can see that. So when bishops are given a shepherd's staff and they're wearing regal robes, it sort of gets us away from the idea that Jesus is talking about in John chapter 10. And it certainly is a long way from David. Now, the key figure to understand the shepherd motif out of the Old Testament is, of course, King David, little shepherd boy, who's called to be king. And so there are multiple references throughout Scripture to David as the model of the shepherd king. The other thing that's difficult about this for us today is it is difficult for us to imagine a leader, even a king, as a shepherd. Because our notion of a national or regional leader, even looking at kings in history, is not that of a shepherd. It's not an image of someone who loves and takes care of the flock, right?
Well, and from a contemporary perspective, I think the image of a blonde-headed, blue-eyed Jesus as the shepherd is pretty cheesy. I'd rather just imagine him as an average, dark-skinned Jewish guy.
Yeah. Yes. By the way, let's go over this one more time. Jesus was not white. Jesus was not blonde-haired, did not have blue eyes. Jesus was not a Christian. Because there was no such thing as a Christian then. So, Jesus was a Jew. So all these things play into our understanding. When we come to this passage, we take great comfort in something because we've been taught to take great comfort in it, not because we actually know anything about it. Do you see the problem here? So it's like reading a book about characters you have no knowledge, no personal experience, but you so identify with those characters that you put yourself in that place, and then they make a movie about it and they ruin the whole thing. Because those characters don't look like what you imagined, right? This is the problem with reading books that become movies. The movie may be fine, but it's not our image, right? Because we've created an image. And I think this is what happens with Jesus as the Good Shepherd as well. We've all got these ideas of what that means. So with that said, let's pick up, if I can get this turned on here. Let's pick up in John chapter 10, verse 1. A lot of red letters here, by the way. This is all the words of Jesus, pretty much. Now, remember, I forgot to say this. Remember, so chapter divisions in the Bible came later. Like, it was not written with chapter divisions, right? And so this is not intended to be a page turn. What was happening right before this was Jesus was being challenged by the religious leaders who were asking, by what authority are you doing these things? And this really is part of Jesus' answer to that question. Verse 1. Very truly, I tell you, anyone who does not enter the sheepfold by the gate, but climbs in by another way, is a thief and a bandit. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep hear his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. They will not follow a stranger, but they will run from him because they do not know the voice of strangers. John then interprets for us. Jesus used this figure of speech with them, but they did not understand what he was saying to them. Nothing new there. So again, Jesus said to them. Now here's Jesus' first attempt to explanify what he just said. Very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and bandits, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters by me will be saved and will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. And here's the money line, verse 11. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand, who is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and runs away. And the wolf snatches them and scatters them. The hired hand runs away because a hired hand does not care for the sheep. Again, verse 14, I am the good shepherd. I know my own and my own know me, just as the Father knows me and I know the Father. And I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep. Oh, let's stop. We're going to get to that in a minute. Other sheep. Let's leave those other sheep out for just a minute. Yeah, I've got to stop. Okay? Let's back up. So again, this begins as a parable, and then it moves into Jesus attempting to interpret his own parable because the people who hear it don't understand it, right? So we have some sympathy with them in that.
If you've ever read Shakespeare, yes.
We don't read Shakespeare anymore. It's not allowed. Shakespeare's too woke. Yeah. No longer allowed in the state of Florida or Texas.
Yep.
Okay. So Jesus is talking about this idea of a sheepfold. So in ancient times, not because I've been there and seen this, but because I've read about it, in ancient times, often there would be a pen that maybe would abut a building, so there would be like a house structure or something on one side, and then there would either be like a rock fence, a rock wall, or some sort of fencing that came around to prevent the sheep from getting out when they're, like, particularly at night, right? When they're not grazing. And there would be one gate, just one gate there. And often at night, the shepherd would lay down in front of the gate to make sure no sheep got out through the gate and no sheep rustlers got in from outside. Now, what's interesting to me is this parable, if you pay close attention to it, is about Jesus protecting who's in, not about letting other sheep in, right? This is not an exclusionary text. This is a text about Jesus protecting those in his care. And that, I think, is indeed something that could give us comfort. That Jesus, go back to that famous Old Testament passage, he, keeping Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. This idea that God, and Jesus is God, we get to that later in this passage, right? The two come together. So earlier images of God as the Good Shepherd merge with Jesus as the Good Shepherd because Jesus says, the Father and I are one. So therefore we bring all this together in one image.
Well, how can you say it's not about someone getting in, because that's what it says.
It's about thieves not getting in, but it's not about other sheep.
Right. Oh.
Right?
Okay. Yeah.
So I want to say this is not a passage that the church should ever use to exclude other people from being in the fold.
So the differentiation is, he's saying, he's not talking about the others coming in, he's talking about the sheep that can...
He's protecting the sheep in the fold from the thieves who want to come and steal them.
So it's the thieves that we're worried
So he's
about.
Protecting them from televangelists.
How do we differentiate when they say the sheep, the thieves want to come in, and they're going to want to say they're talking about, illegal alien or whatever.
The issue is simply this: there were other people claiming to be messiahs.
Okay.
In this period in which Jesus is on earth, he is not the only person claiming to be the Messiah. And there are other religious leaders who are claiming to have supernatural power or God's authority or whatever. And those are the thieves and bandits he's talking about. Now, It could be the religious leaders of Judaism that he's talking about as the thieves and bandits as well. Those who are trying to lead the sheep astray, right? I think I told y'all, oh no, maybe it wasn't, I forget who I told what. This was a couple. So a week ago Saturday, I had a phone call with Doug Haney, and he was checking in, and we talked from time to time. And they're taking care of their grandchildren, and well, not taking care. I mean, they help with the grandchildren, and they're taking the four boys. They're taking them to church, really for the first time in their lives, and. The number 2 kid, say again?
Age of grandkids.
Elementary and younger.
Okay.
Young, yeah. The number 2 kid, lower elementary, is Carol. I was looking for someone to help me with the ages. How old are they?
5 or 6.
8, 6, 4.
Yeah.
So like 6-year-old, right? They were at Sunday school and heard the story of Jesus, the Good Shepherd, and the child gets to them afterward and says, explain the story they heard at church, and looks very quizzical and says, "Does that mean we're sheep?" Okay, good question. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. In this regard, yeah, good catch there, kid. Right? This means we're the sheep in this story. But it also means Jesus, as the Good Shepherd, is seeking to protect us from harm. That's the message. And so Jesus has been challenged by the religious authorities to say, by what power, by what authority are you healing this blind man? Right? And his answer is to say, I am the Good Shepherd. And the word good here is really not rendered well in English, by the way. A more accurate meaning of this word would be beautiful shepherd or loving shepherd. Good just doesn't quite capture the all-encompassing nature of this word that comes across, that has to do with the all-encompassing love of the shepherd in this case, right? So Jesus says in his parable that the sheep know the shepherd's voice and will not follow a stranger. And I began to think, okay, this sounds like religious baloney, because I've heard so many sermons about these types of things before, right? Well, it turns out, again, from what I can read, because I don't have any experience as a shepherd, but this really is a thing, that sheep do know the voice of the shepherd who keeps them, and to the point that the shepherd can call them by name. This is a real thing. So I'm told, right? Well, okay, that's an interesting part of this parable as well, because Jesus is saying to these religious leaders who are misguided that the children of God are not going to follow you because you don't have the right message, which did not further ingratiate him to them, right? So no wonder they don't understand what he's saying, because it would be to their disadvantage to understand what he's saying, right? Many times we will not comprehend things because they don't fit our worldview. And so we dismiss plain facts before us, right? And we will not accept them because even though it is empirically true, it doesn't fit our understanding of what happened or what's before us. So that's what's going on here. So before I pick up at verse 7, let me pause. Questions, comments? What do you want to talk about on that? Anyone?
You want a real extreme, and it's bugged me ever since I've heard it, and it makes me really ticked, and I have to keep questioning myself going, am I positive that I am outraged justifiably? There's a Bible preacher who taught thousands at a Bible study every week, and he's always got great things to say, but this time he says, Jesus is the shepherd, and the shepherd, takes care of the sheep, but he also, you know what he does? When the sheep wander off, he goes and gets them. If a sheep keeps wandering off and other sheep start following him, he'll get that sheep and he'll break their legs to keep that sheep staying where he is. And if that sheep keeps going away,
wow, you've been going to the wrong church.
He'll kill that. And if he keeps going away, he'll kill that sheep to keep that sheep, the other sheep, from following. So out of the good for the others, because God is the great shepherd who takes care of everyone, but not for the ones.
Okay, I know this sounds extreme,
so
but this is actually a very real example of the kind of theology that's being taught in some circles today. This is legit, right? Yeah. Okay, you're saying, okay, this can't be. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And the same kind of theology, the same kind of thought applies to raising children and to pastors being given the authority to discipline members of their church.
Yes.
This is,
women.
and men over women. It's all about this hierarchy. It's the Bill Gothard stuff on steroids.
Yeah.
Right? It's like pastors who teach that husbands ought to spank their wives. Okay? This is a real teaching. And if some of you are saying, I'd like him to try. Right? And that's a mild example of some of it. And again, people sit and listen to this drivel and believe it because, why? Fear. Well, you could say they're stupid, but a lot of times they don't know any better, right?
Well,
They don't know any better,
they'll
Rob.
say it's biblical.
Yeah.
Well,
It's
yeah,
the Bible.
but it's not.
And it kind of puts the lie to what Jesus just said, that the sheep wouldn't listen to the other shepherds. But they do all the time.
Well, then you have to, let me go back to young Mr. Haney, well, not Haney,
Right.
yeah, the grandchild. Are they really sheep? You know, they're not acting like sheep because the sheep here is the shepherd, right? But history is replete with people who follow false prophets, cult leaders. We had a story in B&G this very week about 400 people in Africa, I forgot what country it is, who followed a cult leader and basically starved themselves to death because this cult leader led them to believe that this was the way to get to heaven. That they had to, you know, leave the so Kool-Aid would have been faster, right?
Diana, yeah.
Right. But again, we got all of these false prophets out there, and this is what Jesus is talking about, right? That the good shepherd, he goes on to say, this is why later he says, the good shepherd lays down his life for his flock rather than putting his flock at risk. Here's the test for this false prophet you're talking about. Is that prophet willing to lay down his own life for that sheep? And the answer is absolutely not, because that false prophet is always about self-preservation. Always about self-preservation, right? And the difference between Jesus and others ultimately becomes that Jesus gives up himself as a sacrifice, right? This is what makes Jesus different. But it's not just that; it's also the resurrection. On my recent trip to California, I had lunch one Sunday with a friend who writes for a son who is a fascinating guy, was raised Nazarene, and has been through all sorts of different things. And he was telling me the story about when he was facing ordination council in the Nazarene church, and there was this old-timey preacher there who said, you know, apparently he had given some answers that, you know, some of the old-timey preachers didn't like. And this one says, well, at least tell us that you believe we're saved by the blood of Jesus. And my friend said, actually, no, we're not. And the old-timey preacher was like, what? What heresy is this? And my friend said, we're saved by the resurrection of Jesus, not by the blood of Jesus. It is the power of the resurrection that is different. Many people have died. Only one has come back to life again. That's the power of salvation. Yes, it involves the blood of Jesus, but we can focus on that without paying attention to the resurrection, right? Which is the thing that matters the most. And I think he left the old-timey preacher speechless at that point, right? So, I'm way off course now.
What is the term that we heard so many times in politics? You're a sheeple. Are you one of the sheeple?
Oh, a sheeple.
People who are sheep.
People who are sheep who follow anyone.
Yeah.
And that's a bad image, because sheep won't just follow anyone. That's the point. Yes.
No, but one thing I do know about sheep, and this discussion has...
They are stupid, yes.
They're notoriously stupid.
Hey, who do you call it?
Right.
But think about how your pets respond to you
Mm-hmm.
and know your voice and know you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, I have a show. Sometimes I have to give you little recommendations on things to watch. If you have Disney Plus and you like pets and you like inspirational stories, go look up this cute little show called The Wizard of Paws. P-A-W-S, The Wizard of Paws. It's about this young vet who makes prosthetics for animals who are crippled so that they can run and walk again. It will make you smile, I promise. The Wizard of Paws. Okay, that's my commercial break. Right there. Verse 7, Jesus tries again. Very truly, I am the gate for the sheep. So he's talking earlier about there is a gate. Now he says, I am the gate, right? All who came before me, those were the thieves and bandits. But by the way, the sheep didn't listen to them. And he repeats, I am the gate. And whoever enters by me will be saved and will come in and go out and find pasture. So do you see the parallel between verse 9 and the passage elsewhere where Jesus says, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Same idea right here. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life. Okay, this Greek word is zoe, Z-O-E, in transliteration into English. And this is one of the major themes of the Gospel of John, life. I've come that they may have life. Jesus says over and over again, I have come that you may have life and life abundantly. And here it is here in this same interpretation of his own parable, I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. So Jesus says this multiple times, multiple places. Then he's back to, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand will not. The hired hand will run away, right? Okay, if you want to understand this, think about, oh Lord, I'm just having a brain fart. The town in South Texas where the school shooting was. Yeah. Uvalde, however you want to pronounce it, right? One of the sad stories we know of that massacre is that there were people on the scene who could have stopped this sooner, but did not. And I guarantee you, any parent that had been there would not have waited that long. This is the difference between the shepherd and the hired hand.
Another commercial. Read Peggy Waymeyer's opinion piece in the Dallas Morning News about changing her mind about gun control.
All I'm going to say about that is I'm glad she changed her mind.
Due to grandkids.
Yeah. You're tempting me to sin here, but I'm So do you understand this? Those who do not truly love and know the sheep will not lay down their lives for the sheep, right? They're going to run away. They're going to freeze. But Jesus says the way you know that I'm for real is I will lay down my life for the sheep. Now, he's foretelling what's to come, right? No wonder they can't understand it yet. We have the benefit of 2,000 years of history and a little bit of time to think about it, right? The hired hand runs away because the hired hand does not care for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. Again, a recurring theme. Jesus said this in the previous chapter, that I and the Father are one. If you've seen the Father, you've seen me. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. Now, let's get to the interesting part of verse 16. I have other sheep that do not belong to this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock, one shepherd. For this reason, the Father loves me, because I lay down my life in order to take it up again. There's the resurrection. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it up again. I have received this command from my Father. So whatever you want to think about what Jesus knew when, by this point in John's gospel, Jesus clearly understands what's happening, right? Because he is forecasting, he's foretelling the events that are going to happen. But the part that's really of interest to me is verse 16. This other sheep that do not belong to this fold. So I think there are two ways to read this. One, and the most common way, is that Jesus is speaking to a Jewish audience about Gentiles coming into the faith. This is the way of Jesus hinting at salvation is not just for the Jews. Which, if you go back and read the Old Testament, God's intended salvation never was just for the Jews. The Jews were God's chosen people to bring that message of salvation. So there's a difference there, okay, on that. Another way to read this, though, that some people do, is that there are other sheep beyond those who follow Jesus in this way. And sometimes you'll hear people use this passage as a gateway to talk about people like contemporary Jews who do not believe Jesus is the Messiah, or others, people who follow other traditions, finding their way into the fold too. That when Jesus says, I have other sheep, what's he talking about? So those are two possible readings of this. The most common is that Jesus is talking about Gentiles coming into the faith. As, again, there is no Christian church yet. That doesn't happen until Acts, right? It happens after the resurrection and the day of Pentecost. Okay, questions, comments?
But don't we think that that community that John was writing to, or the many Johns, or whatever, whoever wrote John, was more Gentile? I thought I'd learned that, but I might not have that right.
I have forgotten the answer to that question. I'm sorry to say.
I'm kind of confused myself, but that's
Yeah.
why I was
We need
I was
Jamie
thinking
here.
that he was talking about Israel, but the other way around. But it makes more sense the way you
Right,
explain it.
right. I think it's a little bit of a stretch to get beyond Gentiles on this, but I don't think it's out of line because of the whole nature of the gospel
Right.
Either. Yes.
Were the Muslims a thing then? Was at all?
Oh, no.
Nothing.
No.
Okay. So literally, there was just
This century.
all the Sumerians and
Well, you had all these, what we would call, this is a pejorative term, we would call them pagan religions. You had all the pagans.
okay.
You had every tribe of people had their own religion, right? But no, there was no.
Okay.
Now, also keep in mind, it would be interesting to see it. I've not looked at a timeline on this. Because, I mean, clearly Hinduism and Buddhism go way, way back too. But they're not part of the known world at this point, as our history records it. This is another problem with the Bible being your sole history book, right? The Bible only talks about what the Bible talks about.
Even in India.
And the Bible has no
Some
knowledge
of them go to India.
of other parts of the world, right? So, despite what the Mormons say, there's no reference to Native Americans here, right? Just as an example, right? Nor do you get into Japan or China. I mean, it's really limited to this small section of the world.
You haven't
Right.
gone far enough. I've had them explained about UFOs, about people on other planets, and they say, well, you know, Jesus does say there are sheep that aren't on this fold, so
Oh, sheep
it
and
could be the
planes.
people on other planets, you know.
Well, okay. Until you prove it otherwise, right? Verse 19. Again, the Jews were divided because of these words. Many of them were saying, he has a demon and is out of his mind. Why listen to him? Others were saying, these are not the words of one who has a demon. Can a demon open the eyes of the blind?
Yeah.
Now, we can read this with a bit of laughter today. It's almost like a Saturday Night Live skit. You can imagine a skit titled, He Has a Demon. There's no other explanation, right? Because they think he's talking nonsense, and there was no concept of mental health. We might say, well, he's crazy, or he's got such and such an disorder, and their answer is, well, he's got a demon, right? That's the way you explain this. But then others, thinking sort of rationally, say, okay, could someone who's possessed by a demon open the eyes of the blind? Which brings us back to the previous chapter to remind us that chapter 10 is a response to chapter 9. All of this is happening. Jesus is saying all of these things because of the accusation that he did not have the proper authority to heal a blind man on the Sabbath. That's what sparks all this. Well, the next section is pretty long, and I think is longer than we, in 5 or 7 or 10 minutes, can get into. Let me say that we'll pick up next week in chapter 10, verse 22. And if you want to think about this in advance, the context is important here. It's leading up to the time that we know in Jewish history as practice as Hanukkah, and that should bear our understanding of this text as you read it. Again, it's a continuation of this same thing. So we'll see where we go with that.
By the way, correcting myself, he is talking to the Jews.
He is talking to the Jews.
Whether the community was or not.
I need a chart sometimes about the four Gospels and who the intended audience was all the way around. Yeah. Well, it's only 10:30, right?
Yeah.
We can visit.
Well,
I mean, we can talk more. I mean, I just don't want to run over.
what
It's
is
your choice. You're the teacher.
Let's see if we can tackle just a little of this, because okay.
is a demon is referenced here? In my mind, that's like kind of like an angel is like an assistant kind of to God. You think of a demon as being kind of like doing
assistant to Satan,
to Satan. Yeah.
Administrative.
So yeah, as administrative.
a junior agent. Yeah.
Go tempt him. Okay.
Yeah, so that's a modern idea of this.
So-
in their view of the world, there are demonic possession
Okay.
is the spirit world invading, right? It is not unlike what some people would think today, particularly in the movie portrayals of these types of things, right? They believe in a spirit world. They believe in layers of the spirit world, and this is one of those evil layers invading someone's life, right?
Oh yeah, they had when Jesus supposedly when Satan fell or left, he took like
Right.
a third of the angels with him or something that they
Yeah.
became demons or
That's sketchy, you know. Let's move on quickly. Let's move on quickly here into verse 22. So we're at the time of the festival of the dedication in Jerusalem. John tells us it's winter, and Jesus is walking in the temple in the portico of Solomon. We got a very specific place. And the Jews are gathering around him saying, "How long will you keep us in suspense? If you are the Messiah, tell us plainly." And Jesus answered, "I have told you, and you do not believe. The works that I do in my Father's name testify to me, but you do not believe because you do not belong to my sheep. Oh. My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. I give them eternal life, and they will never perish. No one will snatch them out of my hand. What my Father has given me is greater than all else, and no one can snatch it out of the Father's hand. The Father and I are one." So two big ideas happening here. One is Jesus is saying to the Jewish authorities of the day, you're not among the elect. In modern terms, you think you're following God, but you're not. Which is a very harsh judgment because they have turned the faith into such a legalistic system that it's no longer resembling the faith. And this is what I want to say to a lot of evangelical leaders today, that they have turned the faith into something that it is not. And they are so far from it that they would not know the word of Jesus if it bit them on the butt. They just absolutely have turned it into something that's not about faith at all. And we can understand how Jesus says this to them. But the next important thing here, our Baptist doctrine of the security of the believer, and it's not just Baptists who believe this, it's one of our key distinctives in our faith. We call it once saved, always saved. That's catchy, right? And the idea comes from right here, among other places. I give them eternal life and they will never perish. No one can snatch them out of my hand. And we draw from this the theology, the belief that once you are committed to Christ, nothing can separate you, nothing can pull you away from the faith, right? But then we have obvious examples of people who seem to fall away from the faith, and how do we justify that? Our answer is, well, they never were really saved to begin with. As if we know, right? And this is a major point of difference between Baptists and Methodists. There aren't that many major points of difference between Baptists and Methodists. There's baptism, and there's some other things, but this is one of the big points, because Methodist theology teaches something called prevenient grace, and there is the notion that you can indeed fall away from the faith. You can become apostate. And back in my lifetime, but not recent enough that anyone remembers, there actually was a controversy about this in Southern Baptist life, because there was a seminary professor who taught that people could become apostates. And that was a big scandal at the time. We're way beyond that now, because the apostate are in charge. I learned a new verb form a few weeks ago with one of these Calvinist, conservative, difficult pastors who wrote a column about the danger of someone apostatizing. And I'm like, is that even a word? Well, apparently it is. When you lose your faith, of course, these guys, and I do mean guys, are all worried about this whole notion of deconstruction of people leaving their version of the faith, right? And they're very much like the Pharisees here, who can only envision the faith in the way they envision the faith. And if you don't see it their way, then you're not truly in the faith. And again, Jesus is speaking to them as well. But the point here is verse 29, what my Father has given me is greater than all else, and no one can snatch it out of the Father's hand. And the Father and I are one, right? So go to that passage elsewhere in the New Testament. I'm convinced that neither life nor death, nor principalities or powers, nor anything in all creation can separate us from the love of God. That's what Jesus is saying right here. That those who have identified with Christ, nothing can separate us from the love of God. This is just, you have to bring these things together. It's the same message over and over again here, right? Well, what's the response to this? They took up stones to stone him. Yeah, you think things are harsh? Yeah. And Jesus says, what, you're going to stone me for the good works I've done? And the Jews answer, the religious leaders answer, It is not for a good work that we're going to stone you, but for blasphemy, because though only a human being, you are making yourself God. Let me just end on this note. Blasphemy is a control accusation. In so many parts of the world today, one of the biggest barriers to religious freedom is blasphemy laws. And these are often in the Muslim world, but they're in other parts of the world too, where any perceived blasphemy of whoever the religious authority is in that place is an offense punishable by death, like this. And I think the challenge we face is, who among us is able to discern what is blasphemy, right? But some people are absolutely, certainly guaranteed they know the answer to that question. Yeah. And most of the time, those are not the people who are the good shepherd. They're not willing to lay down their life for the sheep. And I think that's the difference here. That brings us to a good stopping point for today. I had a funeral story I was going to tell you. It somehow was going to relate, but I'll save it because it's a 4 funeral week. I went like 4 weeks with nothing, and we did lay to rest here yesterday on the column of our dear Diane McKenzie, longtime saint here at Wilshire. Wonderful life story, fascinating, very, very behind the scenes, quiet person. One of the testimonies her son gave in the eulogy that was so beautiful was that after she died and he began sorting through all of her stuff, he realized that she had been in the habit of giving away to charity half of her retirement income.
Whoa.
All over the place, all sorts of people. She thought she could make a difference in that way. And what a tremendous testimony that is. She was found when she died in her bed with books stacked high around her. She loved to read. She loved art. But there were 3 things closest to her: her high school yearbook, her Wilshire Pictorial Directory, and her Bible. I thought, okay, that's a great story. That's a good story. I'm off tomorrow for a day trip to Chicago to speak at a workshop at the Parliament of the World's Religions. Just going in for the day for that. So anyhow, as far as I know, I'm here for a good stretch now. Thanks for your tolerance as I've been in and out for a number of things. Let's pray. Grant us your grace now, Lord, to have the wisdom to know and identify you as the good shepherd among us. Help us to have good discernment and the ability to follow you. We pray for each person who's gathered here online or in the room, and pray your peace will be upon them now. Through Jesus Christ. Amen.
Diane was a tiny little lady, and we did some student ministry together. And she